The Awakening of Joel Singer by Scott McCaffrey. Narrated by Luke Welland. Part 4. A Sort of Homecoming. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Dr. Harrington smiled and rubbed his chin, then responded by saying, "Have you gotten enough to eat?" while looking at the 4 empty plates on the tray in front of the young man. "For now," Joel replied. "What is the thing of primary importance in every living thing's life?" Joel sat and thought for a moment. "I'm not sure. Reaching our full potential? Doing good in the world?" No, Dr. Harrington interjected. "The most important thing in life, my son, is getting enough to eat." "What does that have to do with a species losing the ability to actively change its genes? Or any other beneficial trait?" Joel asked. "Take these imaginary giraffes that can change the lengths of their necks by changing their genes. Now, imagine they arrive at an environment where they can reach all the leaves in the area, but there aren't enough to go around. Okay? Now, imagine one has a mutation where it loses this ability to change its neck length. I guess it wouldn't make much difference," Joel replied. "No, that giraffe would have an advantage." "Why?" "Because every ability an organism has comes with a price. It takes up resources, not just using that ability, but simply having it. The extra genetic information that must be stored, the greater complexity, all of it. If that ability doesn't help the animal survive, it becomes a hindrance, potentially a deadly one. So, once organisms enter an environment to which they are well suited, it would be only natural that they might evolve to lose unneeded abilities," Joel said. "Yes. In fact, organisms often evolve toward greater simplicity, and most organisms today are still one-celled and microscopic. Scientists have found evidence that sponges have actually lost their nervous systems over time. Other animals that could once feed themselves independently have evolved to become simple parasites. Do you see why someone like yourself would almost certainly never evolve naturally?" "Yes." "This was the dilemma I faced. We are gods, trapped in the bodies of dying animals. We are creatures with endless potential, constantly dragged down by our own primitive needs. So, inspired by the example of myostatin, of shutting down our limits, I searched for months until I finally found the gene that had inactivated this gene-changing ability we inherited from our single-celled ancestors. I deleted the gene and reactivated this ability for the whole body, not just our B cells. So now I was able to enhance the embryo's genes by using a top-down approach. I was able to give them the necessary stimuli to make them far stronger, faster, and more agile than any normal human could possibly be." "So, do their genes change now?" Joel asked. "No, they do not. Attached to the gene that allowed for gene rearrangement, I placed special telomeres, structures that affect the rate at which chromosomes age. I manipulated the telomeres to cause the gene and the subsequent RNA and proteins to die right before the infants left the incubators." "But you never did that with me, did you?" Joel said. "No." "Why not?" "Because I made a mistake with you in the second stage." "What second stage?" Joel asked. "The development stage, the nurture stage, although I have to say I wasn't very nurturing with you." "About that, I've read about others like me who grew up outside of civilization. They didn't turn out like me at all. They became more like animals, seeming to lose many abilities they were genetically capable of, not gaining them." "Oh, yes. Feral children. A very interesting phenomenon," Dr. Harrington replied. "They also offer an excellent illustration of how you are different from regular people. When it comes to language, for example, our learning causes actual physical changes in the brain. More neural connections are created, even after a brief period of time." What does this have to do with feral children? Joel asked. There was a girl in Ukraine, for example, raised by dogs from age 3 to 7, learning how to act like a dog during that time, not how to speak. The neural connections in the brain that are created by learning language didn't form. Actually, not only did the connections not form, but the chance of their forming at a later age was greatly diminished through brain pruning, the literal consumption of unused neural connections. And myelinization. Joel had dealt with myelin and myelinization while working on a cure for paralysis. Myelin being the fatty sheaths that form over nerves. Myelinization helps to insulate and protect neurons, but it also makes it much more difficult, if not impossible, for those neurons to make new connections. Like the ones the girl needed in order to learn language, Joel said. Exactly. Instead, when this girl was rescued from her alcoholic parents, she crawled on all fours, barked, and licked herself. In another example, a 6-year-old boy brought up by vervet monkeys moved on all fours and chattered like a monkey. After a year in human society, he had learned to wear clothes and walk upright sometimes, but he still had not picked up a word of speech. Both are doing better now after extensive treatment, but the effects of their ordeals are still evident. The myelinization and pruning process made it more difficult for them to fully develop, Joel said. Dr. Harrington nodded. It's not just feral children, though. In a Nobel Prize-winning experiment, some kittens were raised in a room for several weeks with only vertical stripes, while others were raised in a room with only horizontal stripes. A few weeks later, the cats in the room with the vertical stripes could not see horizontal stripes, such that they could not find the seat of a chair to hop onto, but could avoid the legs of those same chairs. The cats raised in the room with horizontal stripes could not see vertical stripes. They would jump onto the seat of the chairs but bump into the legs of those same chairs. They found the same effect would extend to other mammals. How could a cat go blind if its eyes are fine? Joel asked. Because we see with our brains, the visual cortex more specifically, not our eyes. But why should a person have his potential restricted as he ages at all? Joel asked. Well, let's consider that boy raised by monkeys again. He became poorly adapted for life in civilization, but well adapted to life in the jungle, and the architecture of his brain reflected this. That still doesn't explain why their brains should have hindered learning human behavior later, Joel said. Doesn't it, though? Consider the resources in maintaining those abilities. The human brain, Dr. Harrington continued, only takes up 2% of the body's weight, but on average it uses up 15 to 20% of the body's calories and oxygen. Considerably more in your case, I'd say. It's a very expensive organ. But even within the brain, not all functions are created equal. The more complex the function, the more expensive. For example, the little muscles in the hands and fingers that handle delicate, complex movements take up the greatest part of the motor cortex, responsible for controlling voluntary movements. But sophistication, being able to process a lot of information, that's a huge part of what makes us human, allows us to progress, Joel said. Yes, we are the first species to foolishly struggle against our own limitations. We may think acquiring new knowledge and trying to expand our horizons is a wonderful thing. But evolution doesn't see it that way. Not if we're not learning something essential for survival, Dr. Harrington replied. But our big brains have been essential for survival, Joel said. When they aren't bringing us to the brink of our own extinction, Dr. Harrington replied. A quandary not shared by many animals who have survived 1,000 times longer than our species. Take the jellyfish, for example. It has no brain. It's 95% water with just a few nerves, hoping something runs into its tentacles for the most part. But that simple nervous system burns a tiny fraction of the calories of the human brain, allowing it to survive for over 500 million years. But Our ape ancestors got more complex right until Homo sapiens came along, Joel said. But first, our big brains helped to kill off most of our predecessors. How so? Joel asked. We humans were born out of an era of unusually high volcanic activity that produced unusually rapid changes in climate. When the first ice age hit, the apes were largely forced out of the thinning jungles and out onto the plains. Their big bodies and long, strong arms made for swinging burned up a lot of calories, as did their big brains. Most of the ape species died out, but a few didn't, as that ice age ended and we entered another warm period. Dr. Harrington added how another ice age soon followed as the cycle continued, putting a premium on the flexibility provided by ever-increasing intelligence. And the myelinization and pruning processes helped our predecessors to focus on their cold weather skills when it was cold and their warm weather skills when it was warm, Joel said. Yes, it was a way of adapting without genetic mutations, Dr. Harrington replied. Which is all the more reason you'd have to account for it when designing the children, Joel said. Yes, but I wasn't just worried about them losing their abilities or falling short physically. I had to worry about their character, things I couldn't teach them while they were in an incubator. But I was unwilling to turn their home into a prison camp. So I looked to do the same thing I had before, find a totally new technique, one that rejected conventional notions of our limitations. It meant tackling what I think is the most strange and confounding fact of life. We actually have little direct control of our bodies and brains. I had to learn why we can't simply tell our muscles to grow, or shut down our fear, or learn how to throw a great left jab after one lesson. What did you find? Joel asked. I found that one possible explanation is that there are no direct connections between our conscious and unconscious mind. More specifically, there is no direct connection between our cortex and cerebellum, the region that controls our subconscious mind. Rather, the cortex and cerebellum are separated by what's known as the tentorium. From the cerebellum, there are direct connections to the brainstem and body's entire nervous and hormonal systems. But first is this filtering between the cortex and the lower parts of the brain. So our decisions, our training that originate in the cortex are screened, in a sense, based on whether or not they helped survival? Joel replied. So it seems. Now, it has been found, for example, in elite athletes that actions they take, such as returning a serve in tennis or striking a fastball, originate more in the cerebellum and happen almost automatically. Whereas for a novice, these actions take place more in the cortex. The process literally, and again physically, moves to lower parts of the brain. But the process takes hundreds, if not thousands of hours of practice. So, how did you get around such a problem? Joel asked. I built a connection. How? You're talking about two separate sections of the brain. Well, the neurons were still in a pluripotent state. It was only necessary to take the ends of some of the axons, the tendrils sent out by neurons to connect with other neurons, and pull them down toward the cerebellum, somewhat like peeling off some of the wires inside a cable. I was then able to stimulate a pathway of new neural connections to form that went into the rudimentary version of the cerebellum. So the embryos now had a fully formed connection between the conscious and subconscious part of their brain, Joel said. Yes, and subsequently the learning and training programs set up under my auspices were much more impactful, so much so that their influence would override any passive subconscious effect from the children's peers or other environmental agents. So, what went wrong with me? Joel asked. Dr. Harrington paused. When I was splicing off the bundles of neurons from the cortex, I only wanted to do so in a certain area, the one that handles conscious learning. Well, I guess I didn't show much promise as a brain surgeon during that first experiment, because I made a mistake, after which I built a machine to do the surgery on the embryos. You see, I cut into the prefrontal cortex. Joel understood. this area being where one's judgment is found, one's conscious decision-making. And that is why I faced a conundrum, Dr. Harrington continued. Because such a person could choose to change themselves in any way the brain could direct, Joel said. Yes, he could purposefully signal his brain and body through electrical impulses, release of hormones, etc., to make desired alterations. He would be impossible to control, Joel said. Exactly, Dr. Harrington replied. And that's why I had to go. I wouldn't put it that way. I felt you presented a grave danger to me, the staff, and the other children. But you chose not to kill me. No, I didn't think that was necessary. I flew you in your early embryonic state to a clearing about 100 miles north of the center in Alaska and left you there, Dr. Harrington said. So you left me there to die instead of killing me outright? Hardly, Joel. You were the most adaptable organism in the world. I knew you would survive, albeit not in your current form. Joel paused. Wait a minute. You didn't think I'd actually become human? You mentioned that in a stable environment, organisms evolve to stay simple or become simpler. You thought before my cortex really developed, before I could make conscious decisions, my genes would adapt to the environment by shutting down my metabolically expensive humanity and turn me into something more basic and efficient, Joel said. Yes, I didn't stay around and take photos. But according to my calculations, you were on your way to life as a conifer. Perhaps something else, but not a boy, because a boy wouldn't survive out there. Joel thought for a moment of the fibrous roots that had started to form on his feet while living in the Bronx, and how they showed perhaps he wasn't so immune to the body's drive towards simplicity and efficiency after all. He decided not to mention it. So what happened? Joel asked instead. This happened, Dr. Harrington responded, pulling out an article which he handed to Joel. The article was over 20 years old. It was titled, Battle Rages Over Pipeline. The article from an Anchorage newspaper discussed a pipeline that originated in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. It had been finished 2 years prior, but had been intermittently flowing and shut down due to political disputes. What does this have to do with me? Joel asked. When I brought you to that clearing, I was upset, distracted. I noticed that the clearing was about 1 acre wide and its length extended as far as I could see. But I never thought about why, Dr. Harrington replied. The pipeline. They had already cleared that area for the oil pipeline, Joel said. It wasn't even a month later that the two pipes they had been building toward each other were fused together and started flowing. Less than a month after that, they were ordered to stop the flow. And all of this was going on right where you had left me. It would get warmer or colder in that clearing depending on whether the oil was flowing, Joel guessed. Yes, without that pipeline, your habitat was stable. Frigid, but stable. With the pipeline running, then not running, there was more than just a change in temperature. The entire ecosystem would change. The number of plants and animals would vary, as would the types of each. Which put a premium on versatility, Joel said, just as it had for our prehistoric ancestors. Yes, and you were still human, after all. A stable environment would have suppressed that, but the changing ecosystem was the only signal you needed to take the genetic path to humanity. So now you know what you are and how you came to be. But I think you know, taking on the features of different animals and other organisms isn't all I can do. I've been able to affect not just myself, but those around me, with my healing abilities, for example, Joel said. Yes, and here again, you are not as unique as you might think. Secretary of Defense Jack Romwell stood in his crisp, tailored suit, having returned from a 10-mile run less than an hour prior. Plenty of white streaked through his hair, but he still had a full head of it, and he stood straight and tall, over 6 feet. His distinguished face had a concerned look, however. His undersecretary was interrupting his phone conversation with the Pentagon. The undersecretary knew not to interrupt him unless it was urgent. What is it, Hal? We got a situation here. Something going on up in northeastern Connecticut. A group of 3 young people, a woman and 2 men. Kicked the shit out of about 20 people up there, most of them big bikers. Eyewitnesses said they fought like they were superhuman, lifting 200-pound men over their heads with one arm like rag dolls. They were looking for a man named Joel, a guy that's always had a lot of rumors circling around him. What kind of rumors? Romwell asked. The undersecretary filled in Romwell on the rumors about the odd man and the even odder occurrences linked to him. In any case, these three caught up with Joel at a small college library and the fight tore the place apart. What's more, a couple of the eyewitnesses swear this same Joel was taking on the features of animals as he fought. The undersecretary described what the witnesses saw and the helicopter that had come. What's the press doing with this? Romwell asked. They're there, but they have been unsure what to release when it comes to the seemingly supernatural stuff. They don't want to look foolish later. And there have been some iPhone videos posted online, but nothing too clear through the holes they had to shoot through. Let's keep it that way. Get a team sent, and let's lay on the press. How did you get this intel? It came to me from the local FBI field office. It's just them and local police so far. That situation should stay the same too. Let the field office know this is a Defense Department issue from here on out. Run interference and keep the state police, etc., out of it. Got it. So what can this mystery boy do? How do these disparate stories about him tie together? Romwell asked. That's what I'd like to know. No, the secretary said. That's what we're going to know. Romwell hung up with the undersecretary and called back the general. Mark, he said, as his subordinate picked up the phone. We've got a new mission. After we hang up, I'm going to tell the president what she needs to know. Silent Eagle is the only intelligence agency that needs to know about this operation, and nobody in Congress needs to know about it. Understood, Mr. Secretary, the general said. What do we need to know? So I'm not unique, even in affecting organisms around me? Joel said. How so? What do I have to learn from what others are doing already? Joel, you have escaped the limitations that evolution has placed on our species. But that doesn't mean you can do anything fundamentally different than what others can do. Now, that may apply to the others you've trained, but certainly I've gone beyond just what normal people can do, taken to another level. First of all, you should know that your brothers and sisters in this journey are called initiates. This is the title they earn when they have completed their learning, although they will use the innocuous term community volunteers, or CVs for short, to the outside world. Okay, but what about the things I can do that the initiates can't do? That no one else can do? Joel asked. The reason I say you are not fundamentally different from anyone or anything else is that every action you take is executed through the use of signaling, as it is for all organisms. For example, we signal our muscles to lift or move. A wound signals the body to heal. Signaling requires that the object being signaled already knows how to perform the required task, inside one's own body or outside. In fact, the demarcation between inside the body and outside is not always so clear. What do you mean? Joel asked. Well, we know that the body can be signaled to release endorphins to relieve pain, adrenaline to energize our muscles and sharpen our senses, or lower our bad cholesterol levels. Wait, I was with you on the first two, but not the third. You're talking about a drug effect when it comes to lowering bad cholesterol? Joel said. There is a drug effect, but only in terms of sending a signal. Most drugs are enzymes. They signal the body to initiate chemical reactions. They can't make the body do something it couldn't otherwise do any more than a garage door opener could make a garage door change color. The drug simply asks the body to heal itself. Let's look at lowering cholesterol with statins, for example. Statins work by signaling receptors on the liver to reduce production of LDL, the harmful kind of cholesterol. But it is the liver itself that causes this positive effect. So in a sense, drugs illuminate the ways the body already knows how to heal itself. I know what you mean, but it still seems like the drug is doing most of the work. Then, how about a case where the drug wasn't actually doing any work? Have you heard of the case of Mr. Wright? Dr. Harrington reviewed the case. Mr. Wright was a patient who, back in 1957, came to one Dr. West, riddled with cancerous tumors the size of oranges. He heard that a new drug, cribiozen, had been recently discovered to be effective against cancer. Dr. West gave Mr. Wright the drug, and within 3 days the tumors had melted, like snowballs on a hot stove. Unfortunately, 2 months later, Mr. Wright read a report that cribiozen was a quack remedy and suffered an immediate relapse. Dr. West told the patient the report was wrong and gave him what he said was a refined double-strength version of the drug, but was actually water. Nonetheless, his tumors melted away in days again. This was until 2 months later when Mr. Wright read a definitive study stating that cribiozen was useless. Mr. Wright died 2 days later. The case was considered an outlier. Certainly that one case was unusual, Dr. Harrington said. But clinical trials have shown that for many tough diseases, the success rate for a placebo can run well over 50%. But they weren't trying to signal themselves directly, Joel said. They were all hoping for help from some kind of outside agent. Why do you think it works so often anyway? Perhaps using an outside agent or a person thinking he is can sometimes unleash abilities one could not control directly. But you're still talking about one person being involved, even if there is a belief in an outside agent. My abilities to affect others, that makes me unique, Joel said. Not really, Dr. Harrington replied without hesitation. Take another look at the lessons we've learned from natural history. More specifically, consider the 2 most important developments in the history of evolution. The first, eukaryotic cells, cells with a nucleus, and the first multicellular organism. You'll find that it's not always so easy to tell where one organism ends and another begins. You have the same kind of signaling back and forth between organisms that you have within the same organism. How so? Looking back, we don't find that multicellular organisms began when a unicellular organism mutated into a multicellular organism as one might assume. Throughout most of natural history, even unicellular organisms have competed with and eaten each other. Sometimes, however, these unicellular organisms would communicate and cooperate with one another, even exchanging DNA. And then something happened. One of these unicellular organisms died for the good of the group. And that was the beginning of multicellular organisms? Joel replied. Yes, but it wasn't the start of 2 organisms becoming one. How so? Before multicellular organisms, some of the very organelles within eukaryotic cells may have originated with 2 organisms cooperating. Joel looked puzzled. How did that happen? One organism invited another one in? Dr. Harrington laughed. More like, one went to consume another, and luckily the eaten one survived long enough to be of greater benefit alive than dead. In fact, one organelle makes us more alive, you might say, or certainly more energetic. Mitochondria, Joel inferred. Dr. Harrington nodded. What's interesting about mitochondria is that unlike most organelles, which have their genetic material contained in the nucleus, mitochondria have their own genome outside the nucleus. And that genome, along with the structure of mitochondria, is eerily similar to that of ancient bacteria. So, you see, even within a single cell, the line between the body itself and an outside object being signaled is not so clear. So when you affect others around you, it's only an extension of your abilities, not something different altogether. Dr. Harrington saw that Joel was thinking, taking it all in. He went back to his desk and pulled out a couple of crystal glasses and a carafe of scotch. Care for a glass? He asked Joel. I'm good with my soda, Joel replied, holding up his glass. You don't care for anything stronger? Joel shrugged. I can give myself a buzz anytime I want. Now I know the years and billions of dollars of research were all worth it, Dr. Harrington said with a smirk. Joel gave a non-committal smile, detecting sarcasm still not being a strong point for him. Come outside with me, Dr. Harrington said, confusing Joel for a moment. He followed Dr. Harrington and saw him stepping out on a 15-foot by 10-foot custom patio. Stepping out himself, he looked hundreds of feet down on the eclectic bustle on the city streets. Disheveled vagrants pushing past well-coiffed socialites, both passing by delis, then luxury boutiques. Then he looked around at the patio, a wrought iron beauty ringed with a collection of healthy hydrangeas, chrysanthemums and azaleas. "My little oasis," Dr. Harrington said as he motioned around the patio, "and my favorite perk." A bee flew from one of the flowers and onto the sugary edge of Joel's glass. "So you got buzzed after all," Dr. Harrington said with a smile, but got no response. "What is it, Joel? What are you thinking of?" he asked. "I was just thinking that this talk of different cells, or even parts of cells once having been separate organisms, it reminds me of bees, and how they will die for the hive if that is their role, just like white blood cells will die in droves to keep a person alive." "Indeed," Dr. Harrington replied, "and amoebas will sometimes combine with other amoebas to form a multicellular slug that moves as one. Some of the individual amoebas will circulate throughout the slug and absorb pathogens and toxins, sacrificing themselves for the whole. But even when we are talking about clearly separate organisms, the parallels with a single body are striking. And bees are a good example. We find that the bee which becomes queen does so because she is one of several fed a large amount of a compound called royal jelly. What's ironic about this royal jelly is that it doesn't directly induce the transformation. It actually blocks the action of an inhibitor that was keeping the transformation from taking place, to not only greater size and fertility, but also a lifespan 50 times longer. So, you see, all of the female bees are queens, being held back, in a sense, just like we mortals, and even you are still held back. In any case, the new queen kills the other newly emerged virgin queens if she can't get them while they're still in their cells, or is killed herself. Should she make it to the top of the mountain and become a mated queen, she will release a chemical called queen mandibular pheromone, which literally signals the worker bees not to produce any more queens. It even causes the other female bees not to produce ovaries. Kind of like the cells within a body are signaled to become one type and suppressed from becoming another, Joel replied. Dr. Harrington nodded. "You can become like that queen bee, signaling those around you, Joel. But this time for their benefit." So, there really is a valid comparison between white blood cells attacking pathogens, like an independent organism, and the way animals similarly take on different roles and even die for the good of a group. But you need not look at an obvious example, like a white blood cell. Even muscle cells only differentiate as they age. They are independent parts that require communication to work. After all, why have a peripheral nervous system communicating instructions if the body is simply one big whole? And yet the body is an undivided whole, Joel argued. It begins with one cell that contains all of the genetic information, as do most cells of even an adult. Yes, and this is where the paradox becomes most interesting of all, Dr. Harrington replied. There is reason to believe that each cell contains not only the genetic code for how a person comes to be, but everything he could have been as well. For example, the human brain is about 3 times the size of a chimpanzee's. This is despite the oft-quoted statistic that chimps share 99% of our genetic code. What has been found is that many of the same genes that allow for a larger brain in humans are present in chimps. But many of these genes simply don't express themselves at all, or not to the same extent as in humans. Humans also have thousands of genes that scientists can see but are not active. These switched-off genes as well. In fact, less than 2% of our genes are actually transcribed into proteins and become active. Although it turns out that the other 98%, this non-coding or junk DNA, often affects the expression or non-expression of the other genes. Joel paused. I do see how all this information could end up being useful, but what's the next step? The next step, first and foremost, is to conquer the most stubborn of diseases, Dr. Harrington replied. Which diseases are those? Cancer, multiple sclerosis, AIDS. What do these diseases have in common, Joel? Joel pondered for a moment. They all turn the body against itself. They take advantage of the strange paradox of the body, that it is both one entity and a collection of disparate parts, engaged in internecine warfare. Exactly, Dr. Harrington replied excitedly. They co-opt the body's resources, becoming one with it in the worst sense. Multiple sclerosis causes the body to attack its own myelin. The AIDS virus uses white blood cells themselves, the body's natural defenders, to reproduce itself. Cancer uses the body's energy to create and enlarge its tumors, instead of attacking them. The body itself often counteracts the treatments of these diseases. So much so, these diseases integrate with their hosts. We must battle these diseases using the same holistic approach. And no one is better equipped to do that than you. No one can better tap into the subconscious knowledge our bodies have that can defeat these diseases. By seeing how the signals you send activate the patient's own healing system, we can try to replicate the results using drugs or other tools. That is the gift only you can give. One no computer or machine can give. The gift of insight, of knowing without always knowing how you know. And no tech's resources can help you in this mission. There was a silence for a moment. Joel realized now in his excitement he had erased all doubt. It was him who had sent the prototype drugs. And it's okay that all I have is a GED? I'd be with a bunch of people with doctorates. Dr. Harrington sat and thought for a moment. He replied, then walked back inside as Joel followed, over to the panoply of degrees on his wall, earned and honorary. Grabbing one from the wall, he casually smashed the glass frame on the corner of his desk and withdrew an honorary degree. Pulling out a Sharpie, he unceremoniously crossed out his own name and scribbled in Joel's. There, Dr. Harrington said as he handed the paper to Joel. You now have a doctorate from Harvard. Joel stood, disbelieving for a moment. Okay, he said finally. I'm in. Good. You'll get the best tools no tech has to offer, and they are considerable, but let's not forget. There's another disease we must take on immediately, Dr. Harrington said. A disease that infects society itself. You mean crime? Exactly. As you know from researching infections, sometimes we must kill in order to cure. Kill whom? Joel asked. We don't literally have to kill anyone. We just have to kill crime. As you've experienced firsthand, my initiates have been given non-lethal means to subdue, and we are not simply going to go off like half-cocked vigilantes. We will help law enforcement, not interfere or compete with it. How so? Joel asked. Dr. Harrington looked down for a moment. My wife was killed because she stood up and agreed to testify against these thugs, because she refused to be paralyzed by fear. She paid with her life. There are many in this city who understandably don't want to take the chance my wife did. If we could protect these people, let them know they are safe, and instead intimidate the thugs, then the wheels of justice can turn unencumbered. In other words, we're going to help the police do their job better, nothing more. We're just going to start here in New York City, and then take things from there. That sounds great. Good. Let me tell you about the first mission, but I don't want to be directly involved. I see, Dr. Harrington said, less enthusiastically. Then, with a wave, well, there's plenty to be done on the medical front. Let's take one thing at a time. When will you be moving to New Jersey? New Jersey? Yes, that's where our research lab is, Dr. Harrington said. I'm not moving. If no tech can ship some useful equipment, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll get by with what I have. Whatever our new star employee would like. Independent contractor, that's what I am now, and that's how I'd like to stay. I charge about $40 an hour for my handyman jobs. I suppose I'll have to retire from that. So if you can just pay me at least that, I think we can handle that, Dr. Harrington said with a chuckle. We're going to make the world a better place than anyone thought possible, Joel. A golden age of enlightenment has begun." Joel nodded slightly. He rose and offered his hand, which Dr. Harrington shook firmly. Dr. Harrington arranged for a driver to take Joel back home after Joel had given him his cell phone number. Dr. Harrington gave him his personal cell phone number in return. Joel turned and walked toward the door of the office. Just as he reached it, he stopped and turned around. "There was one other thing," he said. "I want to know who my father is and where I can find him." "You don't have a father, Joel. We went over this. He was a sperm donor, nothing more. One whose traits, except for appearance, were erased by your upbringing, for you and the other initiates. And believe me, you should be thankful for that. I want to meet him." Joel was surprised to see that the CEO was able to pull up the information right on his computer. "There was nothing notable about your donor, except that he was our first, so I have kept closer track of him than some others through the years. Unfortunately, he can all too reliably be found in one of a handful of heroin dens throughout the city." "Prepare to be disappointed," Dr. Harrington said, as he handed Joel an information sheet. "Please, don't let the meeting with this man be a damper on an otherwise beautiful partnership." Joel nodded and went on his way, still feeling a little dizzy from all he had just absorbed. 2 hours later, Joel was in Brownsville. He now knew his father was named Sam Jones, and that he was a homeless heroin head, as the expression went. But he was often seen around this neighborhood, one the common gentrification of Brooklyn in recent times had yet to reach. His father spent most of his time either in jail or in a drug den. Nevertheless, only one person would confirm to Joel where this Sam could be found, and the teenage girl told Joel not to say anything about her. She also warned Joel that dangerous men guarded the heroin houses, and that they wouldn't be happy about a stranger coming around asking for one of their customers. Like a lot of houses in the ghetto, the triplex looked like it could have been a nice house at one time. Now the beige brick siding had largely chipped off, and the windows that weren't boarded up had black plastic garbage bags hanging in the window. Joel had to look down to avoid the broken glass scattered among the soiled newspaper and cigarette butts on the sidewalk in front of it. Skipping over a rotted-out step, Joel approached the door and knocked. He could hear rustling and yelling inside the house. The door opened with a loud whoosh. A black man of about 30, who was around Joel's size, stood at the door. 2 linebacker-sized men stood behind him. All eyed him warily, his polo shirt and khakis somehow drawing extra suspicion. "Look at this Walmart-wearing Is my dad here?" "Jehovah's Witness punk-ass bitch," the man in front said. "What the fuck do you want?" "I was told Sam Jones is here. I want to see him," Joel replied. "Well, you're gonna have a long wait. Turns out that heroin head ain't here, and we never sent you an invite to come snooping around, so why don't you turn your skinny ass around and go get some Converts back at the fucking Walmart?" "I'm coming in," Joel responded. The man whipped out a gun. He might as well have been moving in slow motion. Joel grabbed the man's hand as it came up. Joel let him get away with a fractured index fingertip. As he jerked his hand back, Joel crushed the gun like it was made of aluminum foil and dropped it to the floor. He gave the man a shove back that sent him 10 feet through the air, cracking the drywall behind him before falling to the ground, stunned, holding his broken finger. Joel stepped forward and picked up the other 2 men by the front of their shirts before they could raise their hands to him. He placed one on each side of him like a couple of bags of leaves. They stood in place, shocked. Joel strode into the house and down the hallway toward the kitchen at the back of the house. As he entered, he gagged from the smell of vomit, urine, and body odor. He didn't like to do it, but he felt compelled to shut down his olfactory sense. The graffiti-covered walls reverberated with the sound of hip-hop music from the adjoining bedroom. Joel made his way through by the light of a cheap plastic floor lamp. He crossed into the hallway and turned the old glass doorknob. Locked. The doorframe cracked and splintered as Joel shoved the door open. He walked over to the old boombox and turned it off as the rattled occupants looked on. 6 people, 4 men and 2 women, huddled on the carpet which oozed putrid fluid around the sole of his shoe as he walked. Joel made himself unresponsive to the narcotic smoke that filled the bedroom. They were emaciated shells of people. They seemed oblivious to the cold, early spring breeze that buffeted the attic's unshaven and bruised faces and limbs. Their stares reminded Joel of the face on the man from Van Gogh's The Scream, if he had been draped in filthy third-hand cargo pants and a sweatshirt with snot on the sleeves. The worst of the lot sat in the far corner. He looked more than 50, but Joel knew he was closer to 40. Deep creases outlined the bags under his yellowed, crazed eyes. His brown afro looked like grungy cotton candy. The man was distractedly scratching the scabs that were scattered across his exposed forearms and neck. There was a tear at the knee of his filthy green and red plaid slacks, and a brown ring around the neck of his yellow sweatshirt that read, Coney Island Wing Off. Joel walked over to the man. "Hello, Dad," he said. "Hey, what?" the man babbled. His reservations nagging at him again, Joel reached out with his mind and made a mental connection with his father, blocking the chemical signal from the heroin to his dad's brain. Joel immediately saw the eyes of his father lose their glaze. "What did you just do?" he asked. Joel ignored the question. "I'm your son, Joel," he said instead. "My son? With who? I don't know about no son," Joel's now lucid father said. "You don't remember going to a sperm bank 24 years ago?" Joel asked. Joel knew the answer as soon as he finished asking the question, much to his own embarrassment. Any casual observer could tell that this man would probably not have remembered his decades-old experience at the sperm bank, certainly would not have followed up on it, and that this was, by Dr. Harrington's design. "I don't remember that," he said. "Do you need to know I'm your son?" Joel said, as he looked at the callow face of a broken man, a face that nevertheless could have been his own. "What do you want?" Joel's father asked. "I don't want anything. I just want us to get to know each other. You're the only family I have." "I think this place tells more about me than you want to know," Sam said. "Tell me about my grandparents, then." Joel's dad motioned for him to sit down. Joel found the only semi-clean chair. "Your grandmother, she was a good woman. She raised me as best she could. She worked 2 jobs, one as a waitress, one as a cashier at the supermarket. She did everything she could, but I was sick of being poor, sick of not belonging with the black kids or the white kids. I guess that's how I ended up here. The first time she knew where I was going, she'd do anything to stop me. She'd try to hold me back. If she couldn't get my waist, then she'd grab me by the ankles, whatever she could get her hands on. One time she even hid my shoes. Can you believe that? The bitch hid my shoes. But you found them anyway?" Sam paused. "Hell, it was summer. It was a bitch dodging the broken glass, though." Joel's dad seemed lost in thought for a moment after saying this. "She'd even show up here sometimes, try to drag my ass out of here. Shit, even the dudes out front said they liked her. Still, they carried her off kicking and screaming. But they liked her. She died about 10 years ago. They said she had a heart attack." "They said? You don't know?" Joel asked. "I didn't want to know. I didn't want to go see how I helped put her in an early grave. And thanks to this," he said, motioning to his pipe, "I didn't have to know. They got her in some unmarked grave out in Staten Island, next to a dump. I hate to even think about it. I just think about when things were better. When I was a little kid in the Bronx, Mom would sometimes take me out on the boat ride. The one from Midtown that would go by the Statue of Liberty. We could see the apartment buildings in Riverdale, the nice new ones that looked out on the Hudson. She told me we'd get there someday. Wake up with that view. Well, maybe she has it now." "Where was your dad during all this?" "Oh, him. I think he'd have to admit I existed before he could have helped. He was some hotshot businessman. He was in town about once a month. Mom was pretty. A lot of men hit on her when she was waitressing at the airport. These rich white guys included. She didn't go for it at first, not until he made some promises. And he was charming, Mom used to say. He had charm and an unlisted phone number. Mom did manage to track him down at one point. Pretended to be an angry customer just to ask for a couple $100 a month for support." "What was his response?" "There wasn't no DNA testing shit back then. The next day he had a new unlisted phone number." Joel paused. Dad, I know you can't want this. I know you've been in and out of prison for burglary, theft, because of this habit. Listen to me. I can do things. Incredible things. I can make you free of that heroin. I deactivated its effect temporarily just now, but I could deactivate it permanently, signal the right receptors to change ever so slightly. No, Sam yelled as he jumped up and grabbed Joel by the throat. Don't you do nothing to me, you freak. Stay out of my fucking brain. Then he seemed to catch himself and slowly released his grip. Sorry, man. You gotta understand, I can't give this shit up. I don't want to give it up. You see, women, they want me to get a job, get off the heroin, help take care of their kids. The social workers want their steady job and pat themselves on the back for changing me. The dealers want their money. My body screams at me to get off this shit. But not the heroin itself, man. All this heroin wants to do is make me happy. It's a beautiful thing. Is that all you want? Come on, I do want you to be happy. I want to help you. You can't tell me you're happy right now, not deep down. I am miserable when the heroin wears off. Makes me puke like a dog, man. And I gotta see all this, he said, motioning around the room with his eyes. He sat pondering Joel's words for a moment. Hey, wait a minute, Sam continued. If you can make the heroin not work, couldn't you make it work all the time? Get some kind of loop going in my brain or something? Can you change my brain so I'd never come down, never feel sick? If you really want to make me happy, do that. Joel turned away in disgust, stood and walked to the door. Hey, Sam shouted after him. You want to help me? Then help me. Make me high for a little while at least. Joel walked into the living room and accosted the presumptive leader of the group again. He glowered at the man, but he was obviously not intimidated. Joel saw the leader shake his head ever so slightly to tell the two henchmen behind him not to fire the guns Joel could tell they were reaching for with 3 different senses. Joel thought there could be little doubt in the leader's mind that Joel could kill him with his bare hands. The stone-faced stare the leader gave back showed he had been in worse positions before with men far less stable than Joel. Well, I hope you're proud of yourself, Joel said. My dad is hopelessly addicted to poison. The leader's blank face broke into a smirk, then a smile. Then he started roaring with laughter. He had to wipe tears away and catch his breath. When he'd regained his composure, he said, Holmes, you came all the way down here to find that out? Hell, you just could have asked me, or anyone else within 10 blocks. Is his mom really dead? He said she died of a heart attack. Yes, she's dead. She died right out there, the leader said, motioning outside. I was the new kid here then. She was so broken up about not being able to drag her son's sorry ass out of here again, she never saw the car coming. We beat the shit out of that motherfucker who hit her. I like that lady. Any more questions? Joel glanced back toward the back room one more time and then turned to walk out the door. He walked past the hospital and saw just about the only thing that could have changed his mood. A middle-aged man with scruffy hair walked out of the hospital's automatic door pushing a well-worn wheelchair, where a chubby man of about 35 sat. 4 family members stood at the edge of the entrance, a couple of them holding welcome home balloons. The patient positively gushed as he was wheeled through the door. Then, without saying a word, he stood, and his family screamed with delight, breaking into happy tears. He threw his arms around an older man who might have been his father, then hugged the others with similar ferociousness. Check this out, he said. The patient picked up the wheelchair over his head and smashed it on the sidewalk. I ain't never gonna need this no more, he yelled as the older man picked it up with him for another blow. A couple of orderlies came out and rushed toward the man. Sir, you can't do that, please, the orderly in front said. Sorry, man, the patient said, picking up the bulky male orderly in a jubilant bear hug. I can walk. Thanks to you guys and that new drug, I can walk. Okay, come on now, the orderly said, as the patient put him down. Joel continued on, with a smile on his face. The patient was right to thank the people at the hospital first, Joel thought. It was the surgery they did that had restored his ability to walk. Rhizon had merely prevented a bramble from forming on the spinal cord. shut down the no-go hormone that interfered with nerve repair, and kept the new neurons from being rejected. Still, no one can say he and no tech hadn't done a lot of good already. No one could say that. Elliot sat on the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge, looking down at the 135-foot plunge below. There were some stories of people surviving the fall, which is why he planned to go down head first. He looked down at his pale, doughy body with self-hatred. 24 years old, and no job, no girlfriend, no friends at all, in fact. Hooked on video games and porn. He just wanted the pain to stop. There had finally been a break in pedestrians. Now was the time. But wait. Here was another guy coming along, walking with deceptive speed. A slender, mixed-race guy about his own age. Elliot stood up anyway, as casually as possible but ready to leap, in case this guy actually cared to stop him. "Hey, you there! You're getting ready to jump, aren't you?" the young man said in an oddly detached way. "I don't know." "Yes, you were. I could feel it." Odder still, but this guy was just getting warmed up. "That makes no sense to me." "And why is that?" Elliot replied bitterly, finally admitting his intentions. The young man motioned for them to sit back down, and Elliot found his curiosity getting the best of him. "Well, let's start with the Big Bang," the slender man said. "The what?" If those 13.8 billion years ago, the universe had expanded at a different rate of 10 to the 120th power, 10 followed by over 120 zeros, the universe would have either collapsed in on itself or expanded too quickly to form galaxies. If gravity had been weaker or stronger by a measure of 10 to the 60th power, galaxies also wouldn't have formed. There are similar constants such as the ratio of mass of protons to electrons that, if different by a similar infinitesimal amount, would not allow for any kind of life. "What does that have to do with my jumping off this bridge?" "Hang on, we haven't gotten to Earth yet. As you probably know, Earth had to exist in a very specific habitable zone in terms of its distance from the sun. We needed our moon to be the right size and distance to help stabilize our rotation, and therefore our weather to allow for life. We also had to have a large planet like Jupiter, farther out in the solar system to draw in large meteors and asteroids, with its gravity to keep cosmic collisions to a minimum." The young man seemed to be gathering his thoughts for a moment. "Where was I again?" he asked. "Jupiter," Elliot replied. "Yes, so Jupiter, our moon, etc., did their thing, and life started to form. Our forebears then had to survive over 5 mass extinction events, including the Permian extinction 245 million years ago, which wiped out 90% of life. In fact, 99.9% of life forms on Earth are now extinct. That is on top of the several close calls the human species itself has had, getting down to as low as only a couple thousand people left in the world at times. All of this to create you, a collection of over 35 trillion cells, each one more complex than a planet. The result of hundreds of millions of years of evolution in their own right, all containing 1.8 meters worth of DNA, producing over 100,000 different chemicals, and performing hundreds of millions of chemical reactions per second, creating 78 different synergistic organs. You are the only organism truly free to create its own destiny, to create achingly beautiful music, to create innovations to alleviate suffering for millions, or soar to the stars. The most elaborate, sophisticated thing the universe has ever created. Well, you and the other 100 billion or so people who have ever lived. Elliot had to laugh for the first time in months. "I can't do any of those things you mentioned with my 35 trillion cells," Elliot said. "I'm not much good at anything. How about you?" Joel paused. "Yes, I am. I've invented medicines that will save or help millions of people. Oh, and I figure I'm the strongest person who ever lived." Elliot took another look at the slim young man of average height and stifled a laugh this time. "Doesn't sound like I'll ever be able to do the stuff you can." "No, you won't. That's true." Now Elliot did laugh again. He found the candor oddly refreshing. even as he wondered if he was listening to the ramblings of a madman. But the average person has only achieved a tiny fraction of his potential, he continued. And based on what you've said, I'd say you're below average in that regard. You're absolutely fucking right, Elliot said, with a smile that again surprised himself. But as you work on yourself, could you do anything to help people in the meantime? To take the focus off yourself for a while? To remind yourself that no one is useless? I mean, could you serve at a soup kitchen or carry lumber at a worksite building homes for the poor? Yeah, I could. It's a good idea. Sounds like I'll never be able to help people as much as you, though. Funny you should mention that. I was just walking back from trying and failing to help my father, or sperm donor, whatever you'd call him. Joel briefly reviewed his father's drug problem and wretched circumstances. I'm sorry, Elliot said simply. Do you have a mom and dad who love you? Joel asked. Yeah, I do. Well, there's a couple of things you have going for you then. Loving parents and the ability to carry lumber, you mean? Joel nodded. It's a start. Yeah, you're right. Thank you. This has been a very unusual pep talk, but a good one. You saved my life today. Joel smiled. I'm glad. I'm sorry your dad didn't want your help right now, but maybe there are others in similar situations that do want your help. Joel nodded thoughtfully. I'm going to go see my parents and then go get treatment myself, Elliot said. Where are you off to? He asked. I've got a business proposition to present, Joel replied, even as his deceptively fast walk resumed. Joel flew down his chimney, changed back to human form, and quickly grabbed a change of clothes. He was worried about Tina, and so he quickly walked the 100 yards that separated their small wood and stone houses. He knocked on her door anxiously. The door opened slowly, revealing a hand holding an old gold-plated crucifix. Joel saw Tina's terrified face through the crack. Tina, please, Joel said. Hesitantly, she opened the simple wooden door the rest of the way and let Joel in. They stood in the living room for an awkward moment. What are you? Tina finally asked. Some kind of experiment that went wrong, or better than expected, or a little of both. I don't know. I'm sort of a designer test tube baby. And they turned you into a half-man, half-octopus? No, it's more complicated than that. I can take on lots of different animal traits. I can tap into latent abilities. And did he also come after you for your science projects? Joel nodded. Have you heard of that drug that helps clean out arteries and the other one that helps with paralysis? Yeah, everyone's heard about those. Dissolva and Rhizon. You made them? I helped with them, yes. But that's not all. Did you read about those stories about the criminals that were stopped by some guy using animals? Yeah, Tina said. I saw something about that online. The headline said, Wild Kingdom, animals reigning in criminals. That was you too? Joel nodded again. Man, you've been busy. Joel told Tina the rest of the story. He told her about the meeting with Dr. Harrington, his initiates, or CVs, and how they would be taking on crime in the city instead of himself, but how he would be getting even more involved in medical and humanitarian projects. You're gonna work for this man whose men kidnapped you? Work with him. I didn't want to meet with him. I didn't want anyone keeping tabs on me, but I learned a lot, and I think we can accomplish more by working together. If he doesn't send those cyborg people after you again, Tina said. He won't. He doesn't have any reason to. Oh, and I met my dad. Your dad? From Alaska? No, from New York. My dad, my sperm donor. Depends on your point of view. Joel described his encounter with his dad. He's been in and out of jail on petty theft and burglary charges to pay for his habit. He never knew his father either. I wish I didn't know mine, Tina said. What do you mean? Joel asked. I never knew him growing up, but he did come around every once in a while when I got older. He'd come over when he needed a place because his latest girlfriend threw him out, when he was looking for money. Then when I got older, got into high school, he'd ask me to come over to his place with some girlfriends. I'm sorry. It's okay, I'm over it. Maybe your dad will change someday. He has no desire to be cured of his habit. But there are others that need help, that want healing. That's what I feel best doing. I went back to the old neighborhood because I couldn't make myself shut out the voices of victims like you. Now I can't shut out the sight of my dad, and the ones like him. The ones that aren't just victims themselves, but make victims out of others. I'm going to stick with healing from now on. That's how I'm going to help no-tech fight disease, medical and social. I'm going to use my skills on people who can be helped, who want to be helped. How? Asked Tina. I'm going to start a center for convicts where we can give these people the tools they need to turn their lives around. But you don't have any experience with that kind of thing. I'm a quick learner. Yeah, but you'd never be allowed to open something like that, and you'd never have the money to run it. She was right. He didn't have the money or influence to open such a center. But he knew someone who probably would.